Where's the poop? What does the poop look like? As pest experts, we really need to know our
So this question from the Facebook group comes from Tyson Ang. He says, "Hi all, I'm trying to set a price for rodent control service. Should I price it monthly or quarterly? How often do these boxes need to be refilled on average? What would be the best way to charge for rodent control service only?"
Dude, this is such a great question.
Welcome to the Bug Bux Podcast, a podcast designed to turn you into a bug money millionaire. This episode is brought to you by Bug Bux Plus, the #1 training and education platform designed to help you build and scale your pest control company. I'm your host, Eric Bassett, and across the way from me at the Vancouver Bug Bux Plus studio, my co-host, Jake Claus. What's up, dude?
I'm here. Here I am. What's
There
up,
you
Eric,
are.
and my Bug Buxers?
All right, dude. Okay, so I know that we're not trying to shed too much light on this, but I just want to drop a little hint here. You're working on something cool, something kind of Bug Bux related in the background. What can you actually tell us about this?
That's a good question. So there's not a ton of secrecy, it's not a conspiracy, so to speak. But I'm a visual learner, and I feel like the best way to learn a principle is through stories. Mm-hmm. So I've got this little pet project that I'm working on where we're illustrating important business principles and business practices in the form of stories. So they're not necessarily pest control related stories, but it's just stories either from my life or cool stories that I've read other places that have some kind of a business principle. Think of it like Aesop's fables, right? Or
The Jacob parables.
Parables, right? Yeah. So
Yeah.
I hope it's fun. It's not something that's, like I said, it's not like specifically geared only towards pest control business owners, but it can be broad. Any business owner, anybody that is involved in organization, runs an organization, or anything. So
Love it, dude. That'll be cool. Well, and if you guys listening, if you ever heard Jake tell a story before, which obviously you listen to the podcast, you hear some stories every now and again.
Oh, I've told a story or two.
Jake's an awesome storyteller, so this new thing is going to be great. We're looking forward to it. We'll get you guys more information as it comes along, but it's going to be great. So,
I hope it's fun.
Yep. Today we do have an awesome topic for you guys, but before we dive into that, just want to remind everybody listening, the best way to receive new episodes is by subscribing to our show on your preferred podcast platform like Apple, YouTube, Audible, or Spotify. If you love the show, please leave us a rating and a review. Make sure to check out our Facebook group, Bug Bux Plus. That is BUGBUX Plus. We have the owners only group that has over 4,700 other pest control owners waiting to connect with you and share their thoughts. We also have the Bug Bux Pest Pros group for non-owner team members designed to help them develop in their roles. Joining the groups is the best way to connect with us, share your feedback on our show, and have your questions highlighted and discussed here on the podcast. So make sure you find us on Facebook and join one of those groups. All right, dude. Speaking of the Facebook group, and this is actually one of my favorite things to do. I really love pulling content from the Facebook group and talking about it on the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's highly relevant, and it's kind
It's
of
a renewable resource.
Exactly. So thank you guys
It's
for
like
your
pests
questions.
themselves.
Yes.
It's a never-ending supply.
Never-ending stream of awesome stuff.
Yep.
Okay. So this question from the Facebook group comes from Tyson Ang. So thank you, Tyson, in advance for this.
You're the man, Tyson.
Yep. He says, "Hi all, I'm trying to set a price for rodent control service. I am planning to start with at least 2 boxes. Should I price it monthly or quarterly, according to the perimeter pest schedule? How often do these boxes need to be refilled on average? What would be the best way to charge for rodent control service only?" And then parentheses, minus exclusions. Thanks. All right, Tyson. So we're going to go over this and kind of dive into some of the specifics. We're going to try to answer the questions that you posted here. But I think we're just going to go over our philosophies when it comes to treating for rodents, pricing, all that fun stuff. So
I love this question.
Yeah.
Dude, this is such a great question because this is like the nitty gritty, right? And the other thing I love is that the Bug Bux owners only Facebook group is a place where people can ask questions like this.
Yes.
Like, hey, how do I X? XYZ, right? How do I do rodent control? So, Tyson, great question, dude. Thanks for throwing this in there.
100%.
So, yeah.
All right. So let's say we'll just kind of throw this into a hypothetical here, right? So we get a phone call. We've got a situation. The customer has rodents. Now, in our scenario, if we have this inbound lead situation going on, we're asking a lot of questions over the phone. We train our inside sales staff to gather as much information about the pest issues as possible so that when the technician goes out to service the property, they are as prepared as possible to actually execute on what that customer needs. So let's kind of skip forward just a little bit there, though. Let's just say that you, as a pest control professional, you're going out to someone's home. They've called you because they have some kind of rodent evidence, right? So, Jake, if you were on this call, rodent evidence, what's the first thing that you're doing?
You know what? That's such a great question. Okay, so I just tried to go onto Tyson Ang's profile and see where he is in the country, but but we weren't friends yet, so I sent a friend request. So Tyson, if you're listening to this and you haven't responded yet, accept my friend request. I promise I won't spam you or do anything weird. So that's the first big question, right? Like, where in the country is he servicing? So I know that that personally, I've done pest control in 4 or 5 maybe different climates, in a couple places in California, a couple places in Texas, Southwest Idaho, Oregon, Washington. So, and each of those places has a different pest pressures, right? Different rodent pressures. So, for instance, in Boise, Norway rats and roof rats aren't really much of a consideration. Mice, field mice, voles, and sometimes gophers are an issue. In California, rats were an issue, but also a lot of mice. Here in Natura's market in Portland, Oregon, Vancouver, Washington, we get them all. So we get mice, we get field mice, we get voles, we get rats, both Norway rats and roof rats. And we also have the Townsend mole, which is a huge pest problem, which is a totally different thing. We're not talking about moles here. We're talking about rodents. And as everybody knows, moles aren't rodents. They're insectivores because they don't have the dent part of rodent, which is the teeth.
I love how Jake says, as everybody knows, insert scientific fact.
Nerd fact.
Yep.
So, okay. So I know that let's say we're talking about our market, because that's where I've got the experience, right? So,
yep.
So a customer calls in and they say, I've got rodents. So I want to find out as much as I can possibly find out over the phone. So I'm gonna be asking the customer a lot of questions. Where do you see them? Have you actually seen one, or do you only hear them in the walls or see evidence of them? Where's the poop? What does the poop look like? I feel like as pest experts, we really need to know our shit. You know what I mean? And so I'm sure Hunter's going to bleep that out because, but we need to, right? I mean, identifying a pest based on fecal remnants is a big part of the job.
Well, and are you really a pest control professional if you don't have a bunch of pictures on your phone of other people's rodent crap? You know what I mean?
Right?
Like that's what I'm doing, because I'm going to ask a customer like, hey, can you describe the poop to me? How about you just take a picture and send it to me? Right?
Yeah. And then they'll take a blurry picture with nothing for scale. And you're like, I don't know what that is. Is that a blade of grass?
I need you to pick up that piece of poop, put it next to a penny on a white sheet of paper, and take a very close-up photo of it.
Yes.
Perfect.
So that's the other thing. I like to goof around. So, I'll ask people, hey, so what size is it? Would you say it's the size of a tiny black grain of rice? Or is it the size and shape of the inside of a Good and Plenty candy? Because everybody knows that Good and Plenty candies are really just rat turds in a candy coating, right? They're disgusting.
I love Good and Plenty, dude. Good
I
and
know.
Well, I'm a black licorice guy. This is a total side note.
Well, you know what? There's actually a very good reason why I don't like black licorice.
Because it reminds you of rat poop? Is that why?
No, because it's disgusting. That's why. So those are the first questions that I'm going to ask the customer, right?
Right.
And then I might ask them, well, is it fresh? and they'll say, well, I don't know. How do I tell if it's fresh? And I'll say, well, you just pick it up and, lick it a little bit. And then usually you get a laugh out of that. Sometimes it's just dead silence on the other end. So those are things I want to find out first. I want to find out as much as I can from the customer.
Yep.
Because we're going to send a guy out there anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But before I consider what kind of program I need, or what kind of treatment solution we need for this customer, we want to find out a lot of things. We got to know stuff.
Yep.
Are there holes at the foundation of your house that are about golf ball size? No dirt mounted up. It's just a hole, and it angles down at a 45-degree angle towards the crawl space. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm finding out all these questions, right?
Yep.
So that's the first thing that I want to know. I want to know kind of what we're dealing with, and not necessarily so I can give specific expectations over the phone, but so I can get an idea.
Oh yeah.
Because you got to ask questions first, right? So,
I was going to say the question part of it is so important, and I mean, we call it in our sales process, we call it the investigation step,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you got to have to imagine that you're going to this quote unquote rodent crime scene, and you're the investigating detective, and you've got to figure out, okay, how long has this been going on, right? What's the entry point that they have here? What are the conducive conditions around the location that is promoting the activity?
Yep.
And what has the customer done or missed out doing that is contributing to this problem, right?
Yep.
So, I know that there's a lot of people, maybe not a whole lot of people, I hope there's not too many people, who don't like to ask a bunch of questions. They don't like to interrogate the customer, right? But the potential customer is bringing you a problem that they want to solve. So you get a chance to come together and solve the problem with them. The best way to do that is by answering the questions that Jake is asking.
Yeah, and if you're like the sole operator and you're the guy answering the phones, then that's great, because you know what to look for, right? You know what questions to ask. Mm-hmm. If you've got CSRs that are answering the phones for you, then they obviously need to be trained on what to ask. And that's a different episode altogether. But Eric's right? What are the conducive conditions? Some things you want to ask are just a couple of things that we'll throw out. Do they have a compost pile? Do they have a garden? Do they have an accumulation of garbage? Do they have, here in the Northwest, everybody has chickens. And people ask me, do you guys have chickens? Because we do school at home with our kids, we don't homeschool, we just do school at home with the kids. And here, homeschool involves chickens. I don't know why, but everybody that homeschools has chickens. So people ask us, oh, do you guys have chickens? And my answer is always, cuss no. I don't have chickens because I don't want rats. I have seen rats at my house because my neighbor has chickens 5 acres away, right? So those are the other questions. Do they have dogs? If they have dogs, do they have dog poop that they don't pick up in the backyard? Just these are some of the questions. You want to find out what's attracting them. Do you have a bag? Do you have a bird feeder? A seed bird feeder. These are just like the basic questions, right? So once I've found out from the customer kind of what we're dealing with, I get an idea. Are we dealing with rats? Are we dealing with mice? Do they hear them in the attic? Do they see the evidence down below on the ground? That's what I want to know, because when I send my technician out there to do a bid, I want to include as much information as possible. I want my technician to have as much info as he possibly can going into this inspection.
Exactly.
So that's the first thing. That's the first thing I do. It's the investigative questions.
Yep. And even if we're talking about having CSRs or asking all these questions, even if the CSR is able to gather some preliminary information, like, okay, what are we dealing with? Oh, they think it's rodents, right? Possible rodent activity, maybe rats, mice, just from the customer's perspective, right? Where have they noticed the activity? Where's the evidence? What is the evidence, right? How long has this been going on? Mm-hmm. Because, the customer just barely saw it. They barely noticed it. They barely saw one dropping. That's all they've seen. That's important versus, we've been doing this for about 6 months. Okay, this is going to be a bigger problem, right?
Right.
So some of the preliminary information, right? The what, how, when, how long, where, that kind of stuff.
The whoa, whoa, whoa.
Yeah, the whoa, whoa, whoa. That's a Bug Bux Podcast reference.
Yeah.
So, the initial kind of discovery phase over the phone is important, right? And then as we're kind of fast forwarding, you set up this appointment, the guy goes out there, whether it's you, whether it's a technician, and now they have an opportunity to do an in-person inspection, right? So this is going to probably include you getting into some of the nitty-gritty details around the house, right? You're able to see in person the conducive conditions. You're able to move the foliage back from the house. You're able to see and inspect some possible rat burrows, right?
Yep.
Do we have, limbs that are touching the house? Do we have holes in the attic, holes going into the crawl space?
Do you live in an old neighborhood and you have power lines connecting all of the houses, like the circulatory system of a city, with the power lines going straight into the roofs of every house coming off of the central power line, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Or, I've seen we're talking utilities here, right? Just utility lines. We're talking internet, AC, like stuff that goes into houses where people drill holes that are just way too huge for the actual line going into it. I'm also part of a home inspectors Facebook group, just because it's funny to see from the home inspector side of things, and they post the most ridiculous things you can imagine, and I'm like, this is how we get rats. This is what it is, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So for me, the next big thing, obviously, and we're kind of highlighting it right now, your initial inspection when you're on site, you have an opportunity to uncover what's really going on, right? And obviously a lot of the questions that you ask in the preliminary phase over the phone is going to help steer you in that direction to know what you're kind of looking for. But when you're there in person, you get the in-person chance to do that. So it's hard when Tyson asked this question because, and in the comments, people actually mention this a lot, where they said, it depends, right? Like there's a lot of variables here. Yeah. And it's true because how you set up your rodent program is going to depend on what you find. Yeah.
Okay. So I love this part of the question because, he's asking, so what do you do? Do you just add the bait boxes into your regular quarterly program? Do you start out with 2 bait boxes? How do you do this? So, it would be awesome. It would be super awesome if we got my hero, Bobby Corrigan, onto the show. I mean,
that'd be sweet.
I mean, raise your hand if you would just freaking love to have Bobby Corrigan on Bug Bux. But so you can learn a lot from a guy like Bobby Corrigan or any of the books that he's written or YouTube videos or courses. So when you show up and you've done your inspection, like Eric said, and you discover your pest population and you start to understand the pest pressure that this customer is under with rats or mice or whatever, then you know how to price it. You know how to build it out. So I've seen situations where just putting out a few bait boxes is the solution. And if it's mice are super curious. You can put a bunch of bait stations inside the garage. Mice they'll be curious. You take away their primary food source, and they go straight to that secondary food source. So there's a lot of things that have to go into preparing it. So here's what I would say. If you see that there is an actual rodent pest pressure at this customer's house, you want to start off with recognizing the pest triangle. And the pest triangle is that all pests want food, water, shelter, and someone to love, right? I guess it's a square. Yeah. It's the pest square. They have the same needs as all of us, right?
Yep.
So it starts by eliminating those 3 elements of the pest triangle. What's their harborage? Do they have a messy harborage? Get rid of their harborage. What are they? Do they have a water source? Sometimes you'll have a condensation drip line that comes off your water heater.
Yep.
That could be the source for water. And here another interesting thing about rodents is that oftentimes if they have a reliable food source, they'll just continue on just eating kind of the same thing. Like for instance, if you've got a bag of bird seed feed that's open and the mice for 2, 3, 4 generations have been eating this bird seed feed, right? Like it's their main part of their diet. When the mama rat or mama mouse has pups, she'll pass that code on to her pups. So when they grow up, this is what I've heard anyway. If I'm totally wrong on this, then please.
It sounds legitimate to me, so we're going to run with it.
Right. Yeah, it sounds good. We'll just say that this is true. So they'll pass that information on to the pups, and then as the pups grow up and they're weaned, then they want to go for that same food source. Yeah. So eliminating what we call competing food sources is going to be key, because you're disrupting their pattern. You're taking away their home, you're taking away their common food source, and you're creating the drive to push them towards your baiting solution. So that's where you'd start first. If it's a real heavy population, especially rats, you might try starting with snap traps. You might have to pre-bait with snap traps, where you don't set the trap, you put something yummy on there, whatever it is. If you can see that they've gotten into something like dog food, then just use the dog food as a pre-bait. Get them accustomed to the food on the snap trap, and then you come back and you set the trap. So these preliminary measures, this leads directly into what kind of service offering you're going to provide. So let me just say it like this. If you're going to pre-bait, that's not going to fit into a regular quarterly program or a regular every other month or bi-monthly program, because you have to be on it faster than that. So especially with a brand new rodent program, you'll have to probably think outside the box a little bit. I'm going to do my initial service. I'm going to charge X amount for each bait box. I'm going to charge X amount per quarterly or bi-monthly service to check and refill the bait boxes. So I'm going to get that set up, but I also know that I have to schedule follow-ups. So I'm going to schedule a follow-up a week from now to check my pre-baiting, to check my bait stations, and then I'm going to schedule another service 2 weeks after that, or whatever your schedule is that you come up with. But I think what I'm trying to say here is that a key element in beginning a successful rodent program is disrupting the pest triangle, B, being flexible with your service schedule and your expectations with the customer, because what you don't want also is you don't want rebound reproduction. And what that means is you go in and you start killing a certain pest population, and under normal happy conditions, they might produce X number of pups in a litter. Well, if you start killing off the population, then just biologically they'll have what's called rebound reproduction. So they end up producing more pups than they had in previous litters during the golden days, right? So, so you don't want to let too much time pass between services right off the bat. You have to stay on top of it and start to really make a dent in that pest population. And then once the dent has been made, then you're looking at prevention through your regular maintenance program.
Exactly. We're going to take a moment to highlight a Bug Bux sponsor. As pest management professionals, we've got a lot on our plate. There's a lot of evaluation, research, and planning involved in our business. One of the most important, but also the most daunting, is choosing the right insurance coverage. Just like any other important aspect of your business, getting the right insurance policies locked in can be the difference between your company surviving or not. And it takes the right insurance expert to find the best policy match for your business. At Bug Bux, we're proud to partner with the Harris Agency and owner Matthew Harris, who has an excellent reputation and track record of accountability and availability. The Harris Agency can assist with general liability, workers' compensation, commercial auto, and equipment coverage. Harris Agency offers a no-obligation review of your current insurance policy and advice on how to help protect the expansion of your business. No matter if you are new in business or your company's decades old, Harris Agency can cover all of your business needs. Be sure to mention you are a Bug Bux member for half off any agency fees. Contact Matthew with Harris Agency today at 360-949-1079. Now back to the Bug Bux Podcast. Exactly. And, you know,
long-winded answer. Eric, you go.
The long-winded.
Let me catch my breath.
It's okay. I'll bring in my own long-winded answer because all my answers are long-winded, so that's cool. But it's kind of this pathway that you're on from, identifying the issue, understanding the behavior, then starting to kind of craft and create the solution. But understanding the science behind the tools that you're using is really important. Kind of like Jake was saying with some of these bait stations. You've got the pest square, the pest triangle, however way we want to call it, right?
It's definitely a square.
Definitely a square.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of think like a rodent for just a second. You have to imagine, okay, if I go to someone's house, right, and I see that they're having pest issues, pest pressures, it's pretty common nowadays that if I look back behind someone's house, I'm seeing some kind of development going on, right? Are they clearing out a green space? Are they tearing up land that was barren and full of possible burrows before? And now that's where all the rodents are coming from, right? Like you said, do we have food? We used to joke whenever I'd knock on someone's door and I'd be like, hey, that's quite the rat feeder you have out here. And they're like, the rat what?
Right,
oh, you
rat
mean my bird feeder? And I'm like, no, I mean your rat feeder. No birds are feeding on that thing, but the rats for sure are, right?
Yep.
And so you have to understand that with a bait station, right, what you're doing is providing two parts. You're providing food and shelter. Both those things are what rodents like. So they're going to come toward the house looking for shelter and food and water. And as we've talked about before, in Mother Nature, a house is like the ultimate thing you're searching for, right?
Paradise.
Yeah, climate controlled food, water, no predators. Dude, come on. It doesn't get any better than that, right? So you're a rodent, you're coming up to the foundation of the house, and then you're just doing circles. You're looking for a way in, right? Now, maybe sometimes you go up, you go to the roof, you come across a power line, or you come across a tree branch, but a lot of times you're coming ground level. So when you set out a bait station against a foundation, right, what you're doing is you're providing those two things, shelter primarily. They go into it and they're like, this is kind of a cool place. They find the bait, they feed on the bait, right, and then die there afterwards. And so, one, you're kind of battling the continuous population that's coming in. During your initial inspection, if you're not looking for entry points and you're not providing exclusionary bids or exclusionary work on those entry points, then, dude, those bait stations are going to help a little bit, but they're not going to help a lot, right? Because you're not preventing those rodents from getting in. You're just hoping that they find the bait station before they find the entry point that they're already used to, which isn't very likely, right?
Yep.
And Jake pointed out something really important with rodents is that when they identify something that's new, they can be shy, right? Bait shyness, and they have some decent situational awareness.
Neophobic.
So you have to be aware of those types of elements when you're going into creating your solution. So, let's say that you've checked entry points, you've done the exclusionary work, right? You've identified what kind of population we're working with here, what kind of rodent we're actually dealing with, what their behavior is. Maybe some of the initial things that they're getting into, right? Hey, have you been getting into garbage? Have you been getting into dog crap? Getting into dog food? What are we dealing with here? You've identified and removed the competing food sources. So now we're kind of at three things that have worked pretty well so far. If you look at the label on some of the baits that you're going to be using, they'll tell you, hey, how far out should I spread these bait stations, right? So, and without having to tell you what that number is, I'm just going to tell you, go read the label because labels change.
The label is the law.
Label is the law. Labels change, and this podcast lives forever. So read the label, okay? And that'll kind of give you an initial indicator. And then the next step is placing those bait stations in a format that's going to be most conducive for them finding it, okay? So pay attention to the bait placement there. And then last, maybe during your initial service, and Ty kind of alluded to this, do I price it monthly or quarterly according to the perimeter pest schedule? Like how do I do the pricing on this? The initial service that you provide for this customer, the price tag on that should include the inspection, the products that you're applying or using, the equipment that you're putting in there. And then like Jake's saying, if you have to do some follow-ups, a couple of follow-ups every couple of weeks, which is a pretty good frequency, I would say, maybe even weekly, depending on what you're doing. You have to make sure that you build that into the price tag too, okay? And don't be afraid if that price tag turns out to be $500, right, or more, because customers need to understand that with big issues come big solutions, right? And big solutions typically come with big price tags. We're not asking you to gouge your customers, but we're trying to help you create a sustainable solution to actually get this under control. And then after that is when it comes to creating a normal maintenance plan with the price tag of rodent, control built in on a monthly basis, preferably. And then you just go from there.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up pricing, because that's one of the big things, right? I think a lot of new pest control company owners, and if I'm wrong, if this doesn't apply to you, then just dismiss this altogether. But I think a lot of new owners are afraid of overcharging a customer, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're just so excited to have the business that you don't want to overcharge someone and drive their business away. But that's only going to do more damage in the long run, right? Bill what it's worth. So if you have an hourly rate, right? However many stops you can complete in an hour, that's your hourly rate. So if you have to go out and service a bait station, or to do your 2-week follow-up, if it's going to take you half an hour, then bill your half-hour rate. It's going to take you 45 minutes, bill your hourly rate. And the other part of this question, at the end, he said, Tyson said, what about for rodent-only accounts?
Yes.
So here, let me just throw this out. So, the Minnesota conundrum. I'm not talking about Minnesota. I'm talking about the mini sodas.
Yeah,
right?
the little cans.
The little cute little cans, right?
Yes.
The little tiny Cokes
Yes.
or tiny Sprites. So one time we were talking about them, somebody said, my gosh, I can't believe that these tiny cans are almost just as expensive as the regular size cans. And I had to explain to them, look, it's not the Coke inside the can that you're paying for. Because the Coke inside the can, the product itself, it's almost negligible, the difference in price of the soda inside the small can versus the big can. What you're paying for is you're paying for labor, manufacturing, distribution, stocking the shelves, all of those things. That's what you're paying for. So whether your account is a rodent-only account or a quarterly or bi-monthly account with rodents tacked onto it, you still have the overhead costs of your vehicle, your time, opportunity cost, your equipment, your product, all of that stuff. So my recommendation would be, if it's a rodent-only account, you shouldn't charge any less than you would for a regular quarterly account. And if it's a regular quarterly account plus rodents, then charge a little bit more for the rodents. But whether it's regular pest quarterly or regular rodent, it's the same thing. It's the same amount of time. It's just the same. So
100%. Yeah, and it's funny, we've talked about this with our sales team a lot, and they've asked this question, how do we price rodent only, and what do we do, because they're trained to sell pest control kind of in a pretty similar way, which is, we do the, couple feet up and a couple feet out and all the way around the trim and sweep down the cobwebs and the wasp nest. And they're like, well, what if they don't care about any of that, right? And the goal is when you ask the customers these questions in the discovery phase, right, you're not just asking for you're asking so that you best understand what they see value in. So when it comes to actually delivering a solution, you're focusing on what they want to spend money on, which is the rodent control, right? Now, I've asked a lot of customers, I'll say, hey, just by the way, while I'm out there, if you want me to go ahead and throw in just our general pest maintenance plan, which is just, ants, earwigs, spiders, stuff like that, I'm happy to do it. Really easy add-on for this much money, right?
Yep.
$5 a month, $10 a month, whatever you want to do, doesn't matter, right?
It's just the inverse, right?
Exactly.
They're a regular quarterly general pest customer, no rodents. It's $55 a month or whatever. $50. Let's just keep it simple. $50 a month. Let's add rodents. Well, first you got to pay for the bait boxes up front. You're renting the bait boxes, right? They're not purchasing them from you. They're renting them from you to cover the cost and the maintenance of the bait box. If they cancel service, you take those back.
Yep.
Right. That's a given. You explain that. So you've got a $50 a month general pest customer. They want to add rodents. okay, sure thing. It's $10 a month. Or on the other side, they are a $50 a month rodent only account. Hey, would you like to add general pest while I'm out here? Sure. Okay, it's just $10 a month. Either way, you're ending up with the exact same service. You're just arriving there two different ways.
Yeah. So don't get yourself hung up on one or the other, or if it should be a lot less or whatever. And also, don't get yourself hung up on how much time you necessarily spend there. Okay.
Right.
We've talked about that conundrum plenty of times before. You know, you are doing a specialized treatment for a customer, right? And that might have a price tag regardless of how long it's going to be. And as long as the customer is informed, they know what to expect with that type of treatment, that's not going to bother them either. I promise, people aren't bothered by how long it takes. They're bothered by the quality of the work that's being done. So if you communicate the quality of the work and they know what's being done is effective for them, you're going to be fine. So,
yeah, most people have no freaking clue how much a thing should cost, right? Like we talked to some vendors and they pitch their service to us, and then we ask how much it costs, and it's like I was expecting it to maybe be $500 or $600 more than what they're offering, and I'm like, you could have told me that was $500 more than what you offered, and I would have taken it, you know. But then again, I'm a salesman, and everybody knows that a salesman loves to be sold. So there is that part. But don't be afraid of pricing your service for what it's worth. Don't be afraid to charge what you are worth, because your worth is huge. That's why they're hiring you, because they're hiring you to do something that they don't have the time or the knowledge or the expertise to do. And you've spent your time gaining that knowledge and expertise. So don't shortchange yourself because you're afraid of losing a customer. It's all about how you present it. You present it with confidence. Hey, this is how much it costs. And if they give a pushback, then whatever, do a save offer. Well, let me do a bait box for free on your first service. Whatever.
Yes.
You know, always keep a save offer ace up your sleeve.
Yep. Well, and we've talked about that before too. You know, when it comes to bait stations, one, like Jake said, always have a cost associated with leasing the bait station. That's important. You can definitely come back and offer hey, I'll give you that lease fee for free, right? I'll give you the first one or first two or whatever it is. Whatever your loss leader is going to be, that's fine, right? But don't get yourself caught up in a scenario where you're like, you know what, I'm just going to build in bait stations into my service offering. Because if customers don't know that those are two separate things, and you end up having to add a significant amount of more bait stations later on down the road, because that definitely happens. And then you find yourself in a pinch where you're like, this customer isn't really profitable anymore because I'm spending so much time, but I feel like I can't actually charge what I'm supposed to because my policy has been to do free bait stations for this whole time, right? That's a problem. So don't find yourself in that kind of scenario. And I was reading back through the post, and there was one last thing that I wanted to touch on, which is how often do these boxes need to be refilled on average? I'm just going to lead off here by saying, check the label. Also, it depends, right? So one, you might go out and check a customer's home, and you see that the bait in one of these bait stations is completely untouched. Okay, nothing, right? Well, depending on how long that bait can stay in the bait station and still be appealing to those rodents, you might have to switch it out. Maybe you don't have to switch it out. If you're on a 2-week check, fine, leave the bait there, right? If it's been 3 months since you've been out there, you might want to swap those bad boys out, right?
Yep.
You might check a bait station around the corner, and that bait could be licked clean, okay? So you just have to understand that there is going to be different dynamics of where the feeding is coming from, where the activity level is, and then using your best judgment when it comes to the efficacy and how, when you should actually switch those out. Pay attention to the label, use your common sense.
Yeah, and climate also makes a huge difference, right? So when I open up my bait boxes here in the rainy Pacific Northwest, I'm going to see something completely different than Zona Pest is going to see when they open up their bait boxes in Arizona, right?
Yep.
They would never believe that you could open up a bait box and the bait would be covered in moldy blue hair and have slugs all over the bait. And you can tell when slugs have been eating the bait up here because the clay, like the carrier product, is totally gone, and all the seeds in the bait are left behind because the slugs just get up there and they mow down on it. And unfortunately, it doesn't kill the slugs because most of the stuff affects the blood or the blood vessels. And slugs don't have blood; they have goop or ectoplasm or whatever it is that the slugs run on. So it depends on your location. So just monitor, just keep an eye. But what I would recommend is think about this. If you're doing a quarterly pest control service and you go out and you check the bait that was placed there the previous service, right, 3 months ago, and the bait looks good, then consider this. If I don't change out that bait right now and I leave it for another 3 months just because it looks good now, that means that bait has sat in that box for 6 months. So for what it's worth, at least up here, we have a policy that we change the bait out on every service. However, we only use the amount of bait that's appropriate for the situation. So that doesn't mean you have to load up the bait box with all 8 blocks every single time. If it's a low pest pressure area or if you're just monitoring, stick 2 blocks in there, right? Just tailor it to your environment, tailor it to your situation. And, you're going to know, everybody's going to know their rodent program, their rodent pest pressures better than anybody else. So just think outside the box and be creative, and don't be afraid to bill what it's worth, and don't be afraid to be creative in your solutions, just as long as you're following the label. And the other last thing I'm going to say is wear your PPE.
Yes.
I've seen technicians go down into people's crawl spaces that have a mouse problem in a Tyvek suit, but no respirator. If you're going into a crawl space with no respirator, dude, that's freaking gross. Also, you're running the risk for catching a disease. I don't know what it's like in other parts of the country. Up here, we have deer mice, and deer mice are vectors for hantavirus, and hantavirus is an airborne virus that affects your lungs, and it's carried by the deer mice. And if you go into a space that has a whole bunch of dried out deer mouse poop, and you're crawling around there, and you don't have a way to protect your respiratory system, you run the risk of contracting hantavirus. And hantavirus is deadly. It's like 1,000 times more deadly than COVID.
Yeah, dude.
Don't fact check that. I could potentially.
You're gonna get canceled, Jake. How dare you? Well, what's funny is thinking about people that go into attics. I mean, we're talking, fiberglass and mold and just the things that you do not want in your lungs, just dust and dirt in general.
Yeah.
Like, let alone the stuff that's going to come in from rodent activity. So, respirators, please. Also, gloves. I had a good friend of mine who was a technician, and he sent me a picture of one of his eyes that was red and dilated. And I was like, dude, what happened? And he had rubbed his eye after handling bait. So I'm telling you, like your face and other areas around that are like super sensitive, like you don't think about it, but you end up getting some bait underneath your fingernails and other stuff. And dude, you don't want that in and around your face and your eyes and other areas. So gloves, respirator, possibly some safety glasses, stuff like that.
Dude, after 2 decades in pest control and a decade in fire EMS, I don't freaking touch anything without rubber gloves on.
Smart man.
I'm like almost OCD about wearing gloves. I have a box of gloves in each vehicle. I keep gloves in my backpack. Like, I don't touch anything without gloves on.
PPE, especially gloves. Okay, for what gloves protect you from? Those are cheap, dude. I'm telling you, your health is expensive. Gloves are cheap. I'll also say this, and this is kind of an odd rite of passage. So at one point in your career, you will open up a bait station and you will find something in there that's not supposed to be in there. And that might be slugs, like Jake's saying, or it could be black widows or an opossum or a snake. Snakes love bait stations. As you can imagine, they probably would, right? In fact, if I was a snake, dude, A bait station would be exactly where I'm going to go because the food just comes to you. It's like a snake restaurant.
Yep.
Killer.
Oh, that's smart, huh? Dang, that is a good snake move. If I was a snake, I'd do that too.
Yeah, genius, right?
That's smart.
Okay. I hope that we've answered some of the questions that you guys have about rodent control in this episode. We went over lots of different things. And as always, we appreciate you guys taking the time to listen in. If you have a coworker, manager, or an owner who could benefit from listening to this episode, the best way to say thank you to us is to share this episode with them. If you haven't joined the Facebook groups yet, go find the groups and join. It's Bug Bux Plus. Lots of information and great connections there. And if you have a topic you want discussed on the show, drop it in the group. As always, this episode is brought to you by Bug Bux Plus, the #1 training and education platform designed to help you build and scale your pest control company. Visit bugbuxplus.com to sign up and start building today.
And don't forget to subscribe.
Thanks again for listening in. And until next time, keep building those pest control companies.
You're listening to the Bug Bux Podcast, hosted by Eric Bassett and Jake Claus.